All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our September 15th, 2022 school committee meeting to order. Let's start. Everyone could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we have a consent agenda posted. We also have the minutes from our joint meeting with the Board of Health, August 25th, and as the oath, the bills and payroll. I'd like to accept the motion to accept those, please.
Move to accept the.
School motions. Second by Mr. Austin. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. At this point in time, we have our first opportunity for interest from citizens. So if there's anyone with us this evening, or possibly anyone at home on Zoom that would like to speak, there will be another opportunity closer towards the end of the meeting before we get to subcommittee reports. So if anyone wants to speak now, be happy to hear from you.
We do not have any raised hands.
Perfect. All right, we will move on to our recognition portion of the meeting. Why don't we kick off by hearing from our student representative, John Feltus.
Hello, my name is John Feltus. I am the student representative for Littleton Schools, and I have some updates to give about the schools. Sugar Lane is having a fantastic start to the school year. Students have been excited to learn new things, settle into their routines, and enjoy making new friends. Sugar Lane had its first back to school night this past Tuesday. They welcomed families from kindergarten and transitional in to learn what a day in the life of those grades are. Families also had an opportunity to meet with Unified Arts teachers on Tuesday, the 27th. They look forward to grades 1 and 2 back to school night. Russell Street School had a great start to the year. They had their first fire drill. Next week, they will have picture day and back to school night on Thursday. The middle school was off to a great start. They had picture day today. Back to school night is on Monday from 6 to 8. And they hope to see everyone there. The high school, October 6th is parent teacher conferences from 6 to 8 by appointment. Conference appointments can be scheduled online through September 29, from now through September 29. Parents and guardians may schedule their conferences either in person or virtually. College visits will begin the week of September 26th and will continue throughout the next several weeks. The week of October 17th will be Spirit Week. Homecoming football game will be October 21st, and homecoming dance will be October 22nd.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Nice job with that. Any questions or comments? Nice job, John. Thank you. Kelly, I know you're up next. You've got probably a lot to say, but is there anything other in terms of recognition? Or are you going to just fold that into?
I'll just do it quickly and then I'll go right into the other. You ready?
Sure.
Excuse me. Boston Magazine published their ratings, and I'm happy to report that Littleton High School is ranked number 10, the top 35 schools in Massachusetts. Congratulations to the students, staff, and families. It takes everybody working together to get those kinds of ratings. And I would be remiss not to talk about the influence that our other 3 schools have, and students and families have, in helping make that happen. So, very proud moment for our school district. We've been on that list for a number of years now. And the highest ranking we had was number 2. That was 3 years ago. So, only other quick recognition. It's really nice to see our fall sports season starting. We had a home football game last Friday. Weather seems to be cooperating, except for the torrential rain we had this week. We can use it. So it's everything is good on that front.
Great. Thank you. All right, we will move directly into our new business portion of the meeting. We've got a number of presentations posted on the agenda. We've got some guided timelines to try to move the meeting along as best we can. We're starting the year with some pretty decent content. So
When I get there.
we hope to be out of here I don't know, 9 o'clock or so. Kelly, you're up first with the
All right, thank
superintendent's
you.
report.
First day back, I'd sent all of you an email at the end of the day. It was a very smooth start to the school year. Before we knew it, our students were settled in their classroom, teaching was going on. High school, always the grade 9s coming in, struggled that first day. It didn't take them long to figure out where everything was. And it was a great, just a great start to the school year. And you don't have to look too far to see school districts struggling this year with busing, not having enough buses, or the bus routes not working out, not having enough staff in their schools, or some districts. They're bigger districts than ours, but 30, 40, 70 staff that they were still trying to hire before the start of the school year. So we're very fortunate and looking forward to another great year. Personnel update. As I'm looking through my folder, happy to report that all of our educator positions have been filled at this time. And to give you an idea of movement throughout the year, we had 9 educators leave this summer. 2 were retirements. Of the 7 that left, majority left to move closer to home. Been the first time in a long time where that flexibility in teaching has existed. So we're finding some movement there. Also pleased at the applicant pool that we had to replace those positions. So again, I feel blessed that we had the applicants that we did, and that we don't have any open positions in those areas. Teaching assistants, another draw when things change in the market. The number of our teaching assistants have teaching degrees, and they're looking for teaching jobs. So we have 10 teaching assistants leave our district, and some during the last week of August. So we were busy trying to hire. We still have 5 or 6 ed assistant positions open at this point in time. 3 at the high school, 2 at the middle school, and 1 at Shaker Lane. We thought we had the 1 at Shaker Lane sewn up, but it didn't work out. If we don't have any qualified candidates within the next few days, I do have a plan B, but I would rather not talk about it until we try it and it's successful. I'm hoping it will be successful. We're working hard to rearrange staff so that all of our students' needs are being met. So far, so good. Great. Any questions on personnel update? Right.
I actually do. Part of my job is I train teachers, so I know how difficult it is for many districts to staff, because a lot of my students are getting hired out of my methods class. They have a student taught, but they're half my methods class has jobs right now, so I appreciate that. I wonder if you said, and so I can see why people who want to move closer to home will have opportunities, because almost every district is hiring right now, and that's not always the case. Are there any patterns in fields? Are there any patterns other than people just wanting to maybe get closer to home? Are we
the only other pattern, Brad, I would say, is our elementary teachers made up a lot of the movement. We have a few special education teachers as well, but high school teachers, which are no movement. So, well, we had 1 that moved at the last minute. So I would say it finally gave our younger teachers who teach elementary school an opportunity to try to balance their lives a little more than they were. Sad they're gone, but happy for them as well.
Thanks for that, and that makes sense. And maybe we'll hear from the principals about how it's affecting their schools. I guess my other question about the 6, if I heard correctly, open ed assistant positions, is that, I understand we're trying to hire, understanding you've got a plan B, but does that goal affect especially our ability to teach any subgroup of students? Are these people in special ed supports, or are they?
With the staffing arrangements that we have, we're good for now, but we do need, we need those positions or we wouldn't be hiring them.
Right.
So we're final right at this point in time.
We can't
3
keep
weeks from
scrambling.
now, I
Okay.
wouldn't feel the same way. So, but as you know, Brad, if for some reason there's a void in services for a student, we would offer compensatory services to make it up. We've documented, make it up during the year. So it's going to be tough slugging for ed assistants for a while. And we've been very fortunate to have the number of ed assistants that we have with teaching degrees. That's really not the norm.
No, and again, that's where my students who are anywhere close to that are all just getting full-time jobs. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. I mean, it's a sort of similar question, but I'll just jump back to the busing thing. You know, beginning of school year, it's buses are running late and that's the norm. At this point in time, do we feel like the buses are or like as good as it's going to get, or do we still have a little bit of tweaking in terms of bus routes and efficiencies and pickups and drop-offs, or are we good at this point? Is that as good as it's going to get?
No. You can chime in a minute.
Go ahead, Steve.
It always takes 2 or 3 weeks to work the wrinkles out, and you have to remember in Littleton, as soon as something happens on the 495, the roads in Littleton can't handle the traffic that's going through, and there's always going to be delays when that happens. So, bus drivers, they're high demand. You had 1 or 2 new bus drivers driving in a community. It takes them a while to find, be comfortable with their routes, pick up points, etc. So this isn't that common.
Okay, good.
Steve,
No, you said everything I was going to say. Perfect. And then, so I went on to School Spring to look at the job postings because I knew that was going to be, and Brad kind of touched on most of it, but it does appear that we're looking for mostly special ed teaching assistants. And I was just wondering, my only other question would be, is this typical for the school year? Do we start a school year where we're looking to fill positions within this particular population of our staff, or is this a new challenge for this year?
I would say it's more of a new challenge. I can't say that we haven't been in a position before where we needed to hire a couple of assistants. Ever since the pandemic started, we've been struggling a little more. I think this is I don't even want to say the highest turnover we've had. It's the turnover happened so late in the summer that it caught us off guard. It was quite not only frustrating but amazing that all of these jobs were being offered the last week of August. People were scrambling. So considering the environment we're in, I think we're in really good shape.
So is it fair to say that these challenges are largely, we think, a reflection of the environment and the hiring frenzy a lot of other districts are using, rather than a reflection on our operations? Is that fair?
Oh, very true. And the market's changed, and I'm not sure how long this is going to last. You read different articles on teacher shortages, very divergent viewpoints. I'm sure none of you are surprised by that, but the reality is in Massachusetts, there is a demand for teachers, and in some areas more than others. But I have never in my entire career seen the number of open positions for elementary positions. I mean, we're used to getting 250, 300 applicants for elementary position jobs. The market changed very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a new challenge, definitely for us, but I think the entire labor market has changed. So it's a new challenge everywhere. And education is a very unique field in that there is no work from home, and there are so many work from home options that particularly women, which a lot of the field is made up of, have transitioned to for balance. So it's not surprising to hear, as sad as it is as a former educator, that's where the movement is going. But hopefully there are candidates that can improve.
Well, there will be. I mean, we're not doing what some other states are doing at this point in time, where they're certifying virtually anybody. I mean, we're still holding true to our standards. The state's administering emergency licenses, with their qualifications that are associated with those licenses. So as a state, knock on wood, we're in pretty good shape.
Those are good points about the work from home environment. Okay.
Thank you. Next up, the enrollment update. Steve, could you put that on, please? Should be right after that. All of you have it in front of you, so I'll just begin. Want to adhere to my timeline since I made these timelines. I can try my best. So this is the first snapshot of our enrollment. We finalize our enrollment September 30th, and that's the enrollment that goes into the state. Looking at the enrollment this year, resident students compared to last year, we have 37 more students in our community, which is nice and healthy. School choice students, we had 97 last year, and we have 92 this year. So you can see that there was a bit of a slide there, but that was anticipated. We had a number of students last year graduate that were school choice students in our district. Our enrollment at this point in time is 1,696 students. Last year at this time, it was 1,664 students. Well, we're pretty stabilized. And when you look at enrollment from year to year, that's what you like. I'm happy with our numbers at this point in time.
Good. I think there was a quote in the paper related to the IBM campus where there was a misunderstanding. You were quoted saying something about enrollment going down, and I think you were more so speaking about sort of the general trend and not necessarily in Littleton.
Right. Our enrollment has gone down a bit for years, but certainly with school choices numbers as high as we have, we've been able to balance it out. So this year was the first year in a number of years that we had that kind of increase in resident enrollment. So, I mean, one has to be so cautious, and you know, papers take the story at a point in time. But when we were talking about the IBM site, the information that we had at the time is, in my opinion, or from my memory more correctly, is very different than what is going to happen on that site too. The plans have changed. There are more residential dwellings on that site that I remember being presented. So we'll wait and see. I mean, most communities in Massachusetts and any state are seeing decreases in enrollment. That's true with higher education at this point in time as well.
I have a question, both staffing and enrollment, but about after school. I'm guessing, or at least the trend has been that the staffing shortage is exacerbated in after school. And this recently a little article too about families meeting after school. And so are we seeing that as a really long wait list for after school?
We partnered with Park and Rec for grades 4 and 5 this year, and that has helped. And they have a 6-7 program as well. They're running 126 students on certain days. So, but it has been difficult to hire staff. It's the time of the day. It's right through supper time. We're doing okay. We still have a wait list. I believe it might have changed since the last time I talked to our director. About 20 kindergarten students. But the trick here, folks, is we were never in the business of providing after-school care for all children in our community because there are private providers out there, and we don't want to compete with them. Now it's about trying to find that balance again. So we're still looking to hire. So if those people still need care, we will certainly try to accommodate them when we have staff. That's our goal.
Great. And moving on to the district strategic plan.
Sure. At our retreat this summer, we had an opportunity to talk about our strategic plan. And with COVID affecting our schools and school district and every other school district in the world, we could have just simply extended our strategic plan, and it certainly could have been justified. But we really see this as a time to look for opportunities. And so we chose and I presented more correctly to the school committee that it's time to review this plan, and we're going to review it during the year. We have 5 standards in our strategic plan, and then we have goals and elements. It's in your package. It's a plan that has been very successful. Part of it is the way it's designed. Our teachers are part of the process, so they're engaged and they also have buy-in to what we're doing as a district. It's important to note that our strategic plan is also tied into administrator and teacher goal development. So when our teachers and administrators set goals, it's tied to our strategic plan, and it's also tied to the school improvement plans as well. So everything is nicely aligned. We're going to go one standard at a time. We're going to do presentations to the school committee. The principals are going to work with their school councils and their staffs during the year. And by the end of June, we should have a pretty good roadmap in terms of what our next steps are for the next 5 years. And I want to emphasize that our strategic plan is really a greenprint. It's not a blueprint. When strategic plan first came out in the 80s, they were very fixed and rigid. I've never been that way. If something comes up and we need to do it, we will take a pause and add it to the strategic plan. Shouldn't have to wait 5 years to do something if something needs to be done. So I'm excited about this. I think there's some real potential here this year.
So it's the idea that we'll hear reports throughout the year, and I love having that calendar, by the way. And that we will think about, this is what we said we're going to do, this we are doing, this is how we might want to tweak it. Is that going to be part of it? The conversation? Okay, good. I like that. Good.
I mean, there's a couple of areas that come to mind right away. Equity and inclusion. I mean, they're embedded in the strategic plan, but I think our goals need to be a little more explicit. MTSS is another area that we're investing heavily in PD. It needs to be put in this plan. It's in there, but it needs to be more explicit than it is. So those are 2 areas already we've identified. Okay. Perfect. I think my timing was okay.
All set.
And I want to make a comment about my slide. It certainly wasn't dull trying to keep up with the other presentations that we have at the school committee.
We're never going to pass that cafeteria, the lunch slides. Those are so
Yeah,
good.
those were good. Yeah, other ways to go.
That's good.
Okay. Moving right along. New business item number 2, we're going to hear updates from the school principals, and we'll take you in any order that you like. You guys can choose. All right, Principal Kane up first, leading up.
Good evening, everyone. So as everyone had said, John had presented for us, I think we have all had a great start to the school year. I talked with my colleagues, we had an admin council earlier this week, and we all talked about how kind of felt a little bit back to normal. So I would consider the best school start in the past 4 years. And I want to credit really the Shaker Lane staff for all their hard work in supporting our students. We had to make up a lot of groundwork last year with social development before we even started to tackle the academics. And it's clearly paying off this year. I also want to thank the parents and families who've been working hard to engage their children in those social opportunities that have not been available to them over the past couple of years, because that is also showing up in the classrooms. As the kids come in, they're socializing, they know how to take their jacket off, take their backpack off, put their lunch in the trash and not walk away from it because they haven't been home. You can see they've been in preschools, they've been in care facilities. So it's a credit to the staff and the families. As I wrote in our family, to our families in last week's newsletter, the children are settling well, they are learning routines, they're finding their way around the building, and they're learning about heart at Shaker Lane. This past Monday, we welcomed in our preschool students. They transitioned so well. It's always tricky with preschool because they're 3 and 4 years old. Some of them have not been in a preschool setting. Some have been in a home daycare. Some have been with grandparents. So it's always kind of like, okay, let's see what happens. How many tears are going to be shed this morning? How many parents do I need to say, what do you want me to do? So it was beautiful. And I looked around like, full moon, tomorrow's going to be crazy, but this whole week has been wonderful. They come in, they're so excited, they're playing, and it was ready to see them just get ready to play with their friends, play in the playground, share toys. So that was wonderful. This past Tuesday, Officer Wadzinski came into our staff meeting. She gave the staff an overview of the ALICE drill, the ALICE safety protocols that we have in Littleton. She went over that with our staff. She showed a video, answered a lot of questions, and we will be working with the district safety committee to set up our school safety drills. We usually do one in the fall and one in the spring, so that will be coming up soon. In a couple of weeks, we're very excited to have our first community meeting back in person at Shaker Lane. Our focus this year is to continue to celebrate the diverse backgrounds of our students and our families through read alouds and projects, ways we can show heart and have any compassion community projects. So overall, I don't think we at Shaker Lane could ask for a better start to the school year. Maybe a few more subs. If anybody wants to sub, we could use that help. But overall, it's been a great start, and I think it's back to familiar ground for a lot of us. Shaker Lane? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Everything that she said. At Russell Street, we house the summer school program. So our custodians, I just have to give a shout out to them, did a great job this summer for Rich and Jim, and we had a LHS graduate, Aiden, that worked at school this summer too. And they did a great job of getting everything done. And then as soon as summer school program was done, they got right in there. So teachers were able to get in, and get their classroom set up for that time, which was great. We had 3 very well attended orientations this summer, even though Stripes could only attend 2 of them. We were really happy to see new students and families come out for our orientations. Mrs. Romano put together a scheduling committee at the end of last year. I think there was 6 teachers from Russell Street on the committee, and we reviewed the different schedules for the grades, and there were a few changes that are beneficial so far. For any of you who drop your kids off, 4th and 5th grades start outside. Last year, just 5th grade started outside in the morning, and it was a really nice way for 5th graders to be able to get one recess before at lunchtime. So this is a way to just start outside with some fresh air and seeing all your friends before you go in. So 5th grade had that exclusively last year. So this year we split with 4th grade. So 4th grade gets 2 days and alternating Wednesdays, and 5th grade gets the other 2 days and alternating Wednesdays. It's a really nice way. We've had a lot of positive responses about kids being able to start their day outside with their friends, getting to run around, get some of that energy out, and then come in for their start. Last year and in previous years, 3rd grade had lunch and then recess, which wasn't very conducive to eating. And so we switched that in our schedule this year. So they have recess first and come in for lunch. And that is working better. Although for anyone who has a 3rd grader, our lunch routines are taking a little longer this year because unlike the last 2 years, they are punching their numbers in. So that's taking a little bit longer just to get used to the line and all of the choices and how great lunch is. So we also had a really good, I just want to give a shout out to all of my colleagues. We had a really good first day of school with teachers this year. The format was a little bit different. So the principals were able to have a really nice chunk of time with teachers to do an activity in the morning after we left the high school, have a break for lunch, and then have a workshop kind of staff meeting time in the afternoon. And it just really provided a really nice way for teachers to not feel rushed, to get together with their teams and with other teachers and kind of get back together with their colleagues and work on things that were important for school. So it was a great format. So I appreciate, we had talked about that at our admin council meeting this summer and kind of made that change. And so I really appreciate that. Shout out to PTA for providing snacks for that. On the first day, we met at Russell Street. We met all of our students outside in the playground area, and the teachers had yellow and blue pom-poms. We had music playing and signs, and it was really a nice way for kids to just see all their friends and get in line and just chat with each other. And there was a lot of excitement happening, and they come right in. I agree with you that our drop off and pick up and our bus routines, we are only, a week and a half in, but that I'm hoping too that we're getting back to, last year, all of the buses were in line by 2:20 and we were ready at 2:30 to dismiss. Today, for example, there was one bus at 2:30. And so, that's just a matter of that getting used to, getting used to their routes. And so I'm hoping as Dr. Clutchy and Steve indicated, that gets to be more of our typical routine. It is amazing how, I was just saying to Dr. Harrington that we are 7 days in, and to walk through the building and see the kids as engaged as they are already in the think tank, doing activities. I've said today to Mrs. Romano, as we're delivering math curriculum materials, this is day 7. It's just hard to believe that it's just day 7 and the kids are doing that great. So we've had a really positive start. Little tweaks here and there. It's just a matter of establishing those routines, but it's been a great start. Thank you. Jason.
Hello, everybody. I just want to start off by saying I am so excited for the school year. My principalship has been entirely COVID. And so to begin a year where I don't have to worry about mitigation strategies, distancing, which lunches, all these things, it was incredible to actually spend the summer focusing on the job of, building structure and creating an engaging environment. And we definitely took advantage of that. We tried to plan everything to the point so that the kids would come in and we could hit the ground running. I will tell you, this far in, it has been the best start to the school year that I can remember as an administrator or a teacher. Just the vibe in the building is different. To see the kids coming back more mature, ready to learn. It has been that in and of itself is the real win. But also, the focus that we have for our students. Some of the logistical things. New cafeteria tables have allowed us to offer more seating so students don't feel excluded, right? And have some options. We've made some great hires over the summer on our staff. The bus situation has been really good. I don't know if the numbers bear it out, but it feels like there are more students getting on the bus. Last year, it felt like everybody was driving their students to school and the traffic jams were big. We still have them for about 5 minutes in the morning, but that usually gets taken care of pretty quickly. For everything else, it's what you would expect. High engagement, high energy. Our focus this year is really on building student relationships. It has been something that we have doubled down on as administrators. Our first day PD was dedicated to that. Our half day PD yesterday was dedicated to that. So the staff knows that this is critical for us this year. I personally view this year as important in education as maybe any in the last 100 years, right? We just have to do this right. And so the middle school, we are not taking any chances, but yet we also want to create the fun and enjoyment of middle school that these kids need to fall in love with learning again and make it something that they really want to do. So that's my feel. Thank you.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question? To that end, I remember at the end of last year, you talked to us about changing the advisory period, and we're only a week and a half in. Are we starting to see maybe the benefits of that?
Yeah, so
That-
what we did, we still offer it twice a week, but we increased the time. I gave a survey to our teachers last year about the advisory time. I think it was around 15 minutes or so. And what I hoped for, was shocked to see, is that most teachers wanted more time. And that was something that I didn't expect when I said, so we added 5 minutes to the schedule, which doesn't seem like much, but we have a good 25-minute block where it's dedicated just for teachers and students and TAs to connect and speak about things that are non-academic, things that are important to them, and to get to know you. My belief is that every student should have at least one adult that they have a connection with in the building. And having taught for 17 years, now been an administrator for 5, it is my mission to make sure that that's the case. And so we're starting to really see that. I had so many teachers come and go, oh my God, I love my advisory. I think they're getting used to it. And as we do it, and we're going to keep promoting it and building that engagement, we hope that's something that kids really start to look forward to. Our 6th graders just love it, right? They're just like over the moon. 7th graders are still kind of figuring it out, and the 8th graders are buying it. So that's something that we've really been pushing for, and we'll continue to do so. And we'll support that with advisory training and how to make it the most effective time that it can be.
Great. I was really excited about that. I'm glad it's working out.
Yeah, it's working out great. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Evening, everyone.
Hello.
So it's going to sound remarkably familiar, which is great to say, to be consistent and be a very great news. John, I'm sure you touched upon it a lot in your introductory report, that the building is bustling with energy and lots of positive spirit. It's just really exciting and thrilling to see kids. In many cases, I just came from back to school, and actually left a little bit earlier. I was just back to school, make that chance to talked to lots of parents, hear some remarks in the auditorium. And it really is exciting to see the kids engage with each other, really happy. I mean, it might be just my observation, my wish, perhaps, but I think it's more than that because other people are observing it and noticing it. And we're looking for that because there's been so much isolation of kids kind of keeping a little bit of social distance, more than they need to social distance. And kids seem, I think, John, you echo this, they really have come out of this as well as we could expect at this point in time and moving forward. Some of the previous principals touched upon the resumption of routines. We're certainly looking to see that. We had class meetings at the beginning of the school year to go over how we're doing a little bit of a reset. We let a lot of things go that we had to sort of tighten up the ship a little bit now that we have to get back on things. So kids have responded really well. It's day 7, Cheryl. They've responded really well to that. So that's what we're doing. Our professional development has gone well with staff. They're excited to be back. They're to see the camaraderie and collegiality with the faculty. It's been focused at Jason mentioned UDL. That's a district-wide focus at all the schools. We've had really good workshop sessions within the Universal Time to Learning. I'm sure you'll hear more about that for a year. So we're off to a great start. Happy to report that to you tonight.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So nice to hear such positive news coming back to school. Of course, feel free. It's okay to share things that aren't going okay. So, I'm sure that wasn't the case in the first week of school or so, but feel free to be honest with us as the year goes. And everyone's all set there, right? Great. Okay, moving right along, we're going to hear new business item number 3, an update on the bullying prevention. So that's going to be, I believe, Superintendent Clenchey as well as Director of Student Services Lynn Snow. So we can provide a presentation.
And I'll start off. And Justin, you had mentioned, don't hesitate to talk about challenges. I mean, one of the trepidations I have as a superintendent this year is certainly wondering what's going to happen in terms of staffing as the year progresses. I mean, we've been wearing masks for 2 years, assuming that our resistance to other contagions aren't quite what it was prior to the pandemic. So there'll be more flus in our schools. COVID is not gone, folks. It's still out there and it's in our schools. And there are not a lot of subs around. And we managed last year to do some incredible things, keeping our classes running at certain times of the year. And it doesn't take much for things to go a bit the other way. So we're watching closely, still using mitigation strategies in school in terms of our HVAC systems, HEPA filters, cleaning processes, etc. So keeping our fingers crossed. Last year when we resumed school, I spoke about this first day back. We were really excited about getting everybody back in schools. In the first month or so, we were settling into learning. There was quite a disparity in terms of how ready our students were to be members of the classroom again. Getting back into routines and also having the endurance for 6.5 hours of learning from class to class. Most of our students were very resilient, but after a couple of months, it was clear to us, and we weren't surprised that a number of our students were not ready. So we spent last year making sure that we met students where they were, provided any supports we could to help them out with social and emotional challenges, mental health challenges, etc. This year does feel different, and it feels better. But the point I want to make and drive home is that doesn't mean all those challenges are gone. And we need to be aware of it. We have staff for it. We're ready for it. And we're not coming into this year thinking that we're not going to have some students that are not struggling, because we will. And as a school district, schools, and a community, we need to continue to pull together, to work together, to make sure that we meet our students' needs. And it takes a whole village to raise a child. And we need to continue to do what we've done in the past to make sure that we do everything we can to help every student thrive and succeed in our schools. So having said that, we want to take a look at bullying prevention and intervention. I'm sorry I'm going to do this to you in advance, but I cannot just summarize the first 3 slides because that's not what the law says. So you're going to have to entertain my reading for the first 3 pages. Bullying is covered under MGL C71 370 and 603 CMR 49. So it's in the law. And you can see on the left-hand side of the slide our link to the LPS Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan. Lena's going to go through some highlights of that plan and also the DESE guidance in regard to bullying. So when you see the right-hand side, you can see the definition of bullying is not short. Many components to it. So bullying is defined as the repeated use by one or more students or by a member of the school staff, including but not limited to an educator, administrator, school nurse, cafeteria worker, custodian, bus driver, athletic coach, advisor to an extracurricular activity or paraprofessional of a written, verbal, or electronic expression or a physical act or gesture or any combination thereof directed at a victim that, number 1, causes physical or emotional harm to the victim or damage to the victim's property. 2, places the victim in reasonable fear of harm to himself or of damage to his or her property. 3, creates a hostile environment at school for the victim. 4, infringes on the rights of the victim at school. Or 5, materially and substantially disrupts should be the education process or the orderly operation of the school. So again, that's a lot to digest. That's the guidance that we follow when we're looking at bullying incidences.
I'm sorry, Kelly, that's not our definition, that's in the law.
That's the law definition of bullying. Now, sometimes I wonder that if we do a bullying investigation and there isn't the grounds of bullying, I worry that people feel that we don't do anything. Well, that's not true. If a student mistreats another student, there are not only consequences for that behavior, but our job is also to work with that student and have them understand why that behavior is inappropriate. Well, it's twofold. I mean, quite honestly, folks, consequences without any type of process to change behavior is fairly ineffective. So that's what we do, and that's probably what every school district does. So I wanted to make that point very clear. And we cannot, because of confidentiality laws, talk about the other individual. We can talk about your child with you, but we cannot talk about the other child. That's against the law. And it breaches confidentiality laws. So I'd like to drive that point home tonight as well. So on page 2, prohibits acts of bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation. Includes on school grounds, property, immediately adjacent to school grounds, at a school-sponsored or school-related activity, function, or program, whether on or off school grounds, at a school bus stop, on a school bus or other vehicle owned, leased, or used by a school district or school, or through the use of technology or an electronic device owned, leased, or used by a school district or school, and or at a location, activity, function, or program that is not school related, or through the use of technology or an electronic device that is not owned, leased, or used by a school district or school. And then we have the writing in red. If the bullying, 1, creates a hostile environment at school for the target, 2, infringes on the target's rights at school, 3, materially and substantially disrupts the educational process or the orderly operation of the school. Those are key points for that second bullet. As technology has emerged throughout time, one of the challenges that schools have, colleges have, families have, parents have, is misusing social media. We're not exempt from that in our community or in our schools. I guess a point that I really want to make here too is we set examples for our students in this community, and we all need to lead by example. Our students watch us very closely. It's amazing how closely they watch us. In fact, most of our students will be able to tell whether we wear the same shirt 2 days in a row. I mean, that's just who they are as students. So together we can make a difference, but we need to work together when we have issues in our community and in our schools.
It seems to me that the most difficult part of this definition would be creates a hostile environment, because that seems like that's where the most gray area exists. Is there, how do we determine what's from uncomfortable to hostile to?
Well, if what has happened to a student hinders his or her ability to learn,
Mhm.
and continues to do that's the definition of hostile.
Right.
I mean,
But that's not the only definition of hostile.
no, but there are levels of hostility,
Right.
obviously, but we're looking at what point should we intervene? And if something happens outside the bullets, or the bullet point, first bullet point on that page, we have to be darn sure that we have jurisdiction to do something about it, because if we don't, we'll be in litigation right away. And so there are tricky parts to this law, but we want every student to feel supported and welcome in our schools. And we do everything that we can to try to make that happen. And, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's a little more difficult, but we don't give up. And I think that's an important point to make as well. And I'm glad you brought that up, because if you look at hostility at the upper end of the continuum, that has a very different meaning to
Right. It just, I wasn't trying to put you in the spot. I'm just noting that seems where a lot of gray areas could exist. Someone said something mean about somebody's, whether they're performing in a game or a play or just as a person. Well, then that person doesn't want to go to class and sit next to them the next day. Is that a hostile environment, or just, I can just see where that would be very difficult for y'all and for the families to navigate.
And conflict is part of being a human being. It's how we learn how to deal with conflict, and are committed to treating everybody with respect and dignity. Those are the key things that we all need to embrace. So the bottom point that I wanted to mention as well, the school district is not required to staff any non-school related activities, functions, or programs. So the third page is just, how do you report bullying? Well, for a staff member, they must promptly or immediately report to the principal or the principal's designee any instances of bullying or retaliation witnessed by the staff member, or that is reported to the staff member by a student, parent, other individual, and then follow up with an incident referral form. Staff may not make anonymous reports. Students and parents are strongly encouraged to report any instances of bullying of which they become aware. Form of reports of bullying may be made orally or in writing. We have a district reporting form that can be used, but it's not required. All oral reports must be reduced to writing by school staff. We need a record of these things. Reports from students and their parents may be made anonymously. Anonymous reports must be investigated to the extent possible, but may not result in the imposition of student discipline. It is much tougher to investigate anonymous reports, because we're searching for things that we don't know that other people know. It's an elongated process, and it's not as effective as having the information that we need to conduct a swift investigation and get to the bottom of the issue. So I'd urge all of you to think about that. prior to wanting to remain anonymous. And realistically, if any of this information came to play and we were legally challenged in a court of law, it would be very hard to guarantee anonymity to anybody, because that's just not what happens in a court of law. We would be subpoenaed under oath and we would be required to tell our story.
Can I ask a clarifying question here? I have two actually. One, if people did want to report something anonymously, is that a phone call? Is that just?
A phone call would be sufficient.
Okay. The second is, I am confused. If you get a report about a student and you do an investigation and find clear wrongdoing, just because the original tip was not attached to a name, that means there can be no student discipline?
No, we can.
Okay, so I misunderstand that last
Yeah,
part.
we
Okay.
can. I mean, it's just harder to hone in on the incident. It may be a situation that is so apparent that we will witness something happening after we.
So this it may not result, it shall not result.
Right.
It's possible that,
It
okay,
may,
gotcha.
it
That's what I
may.
need. All right,
May.
thank you. That's what I need.
Do you find a lot of your reports are anonymous or usually people pretty forthcoming with this?
We have a mixture. I mean, there is a concern, and I've quite honestly dealt with this concern since I first started teaching and went into administration, that parents are afraid that there will be retaliation of some sort by peers, other families, and you know, we try to reassure them, and we're in a good community here, and we're fortunate that. I'm not going to say we don't have any of it, but we don't have. It's not something that's substantial by any means, and if it's to a point where it's affecting your child, the best way for us to deal with it is to be forthright and give us the information we need to deal with it, to put it to rest. And once we have that information and a finding is given, then we put in various processes to try to ensure that there will be no conflict again, or no interference, or no retaliation. And if something like that happens, then obviously we would move to the next level. So, I mean, it is a process. We at times find out that somebody may lodge a complaint of bullying, and in the end, the individual's child was the one that was the instigator of bullying. I mean, we have a mixture of things that happen. But what's important to take away from my comments is we're committed to ensure we do everything we possibly can to have every student in our school feel safe and supported and connected. And that's our ultimate goal. Glenn, I'm going to turn it over to you this time.
Sorry, Lynn, just a quick question on the same topic here. So, sorry for my ignorance on this, but this is such an important topic that I feel like the entire, and it's okay if we go over 10 minutes here because it was, is there a specific form like available on the district's website
Yes.
for bullying? And it's,
Yep.
you're going to cover that. Okay. So in the event that I would imagine that these often start phone call or email, and then maybe we notify the person, you know, geez, if you'd like to put it all in writing for us on the form, there's places to gather all the specific information, and they might say no, but at that point in time, it's sort of the complaint's already been made, and then the staff member would have to put in writing, if I'm understanding this correctly.
And we have paper copies as well.
Okay. And then I guess my only other question so far, which you might address, is just professional development and or training on this topic. You know, how often does that take place and to what level? And are the administrators trained differently than the rest of the staff? And so be it.
I'll go in.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a quick comment though,
Sure.
if I may.
Of course.
Our administrators are updated every year. And this year we did a major update and had a lawyer come in and work for 2.5 hours with our administrators, going through every aspect of bullying, prevention, investigative procedures, checklists, everything. So, and we do that. I mean, that's not a one and done. I mean, in the next 3 years, we'll probably do the same thing with that kind of intensity. But it's always something that we review from year to year, and we have an opportunity to talk about, some of the challenges that we've had around the table as well, dealing with bullying in our schools, or we're going to rephrase that a bit, reports of bullying in our school. And I mean, you continue to learn as you work together, and try to make sure that we support our students every way we can. Sorry.
Sure. So I can actually, I'll piggyback on that with regard to the professional development. I will go into more in depth about the training that the entire administrative team went through, but I think it would be helpful to understand the training that all of the staff in Littleton Public Schools goes through, and that includes teachers, teaching assistants, custodians, cafeteria staff, all of the administrative assistants. They all go through training, bullying recognition and response. They also go through a Title IX compliance overview. They all have a training on Americans with Disabilities Act overview, child abuse mandatory reporting. There's also a training that they go through on cybersecurity and de-escalation strategies, as well as Title VI harassment. So every staff every year goes through all of those trainings as mandated training.
Does that include athletic coaches?
Yes, every employee
Yes,
of
okay.
Littleton Public. Mhm.
Like,
And then when it's an online program, and there are quizzes at the end of each section, and then they need a certain percentage before they can move on to the next section, and then they sign off at the end, and we are notified when it's completed.
Right, and we're very lucky to have, we use Safe Schools, which is an online platform. So I'm able to track compliance, I'm able to see progress on trainings, confirm when trainings are complete, reassign trainings as needed. It's a really nice, really robust platform, and the trainings are updated as regulations and laws are updated as well. And we have ones that are even specific to Massachusetts.
Are these all required by the state of Massachusetts, or there's Littleton is required?
The state.
And federal as well.
Do you want me to walk us through our plan?
Of course.
Okay, great.
You bet.
Thank you. So Brad, you brought up a good question, and really the reason for the in-depth professional development is so that the administrative team has the training and knowledge to be able to navigate that gray area. Because being able to identify if the bullying creates a hostile environment at the school for the target, infringes on the target's rights at school, and material and substantially disrupts the education process for the orderly operation of the school, that is why we have to do an investigation and make a determination. But the way we do that is provide resources, tools, and professional development to the individuals who are completing those investigations. And so as Dr. Clenchey said, there is an obligation to report for staff, students, and parents, and we do provide multiple vehicles to be able to provide a report of bullying. So Justin, as you said, parents can go online, they can fill out the form. What's helpful about the form, I feel like, is sometimes when a child shares information, it could be in the evening, and they, don't want to call and leave a voicemail, or they don't know who's going to be picking up or listening to those voicemails. So being able to enter that, the online reporting form is really helpful. And the administrators get a copy of that form, and I get copied on all of them. So there's kind of like a two-step. So we're always, in contact with one another when a report does come in. And so they can also be made in, orally as well. And parents do reach out and call during the school day, but we want to make sure that parents have multiple means to be able to make reports. Littleton Public School staff members are required. You can move on to the next, that slide. Are required to report immediately to the principal when they witness or become aware of conduct that may be bullying or retaliation. The requirement to report doesn't limit the authority of the staff member to respond to behavioral or disciplinary incidents that are consistent with school or district policies. And so then just to move on to an initial response of a bullying complaint, there are a couple things that we need to do. Move on to the next slide. is we need to determine first if there's a need for interim measures to support the alleged target safety or well-being. Because even though we need to take our time to do a thorough, comprehensive investigation, because we don't want students wrongly accused, but we also want to ensure that we are able to go in depth. That being said, if there's a student that doesn't feel safe, our priority needs to be restoring their sense of safety and well-being. And so we also need to determine whether there's a basis for immediate notification to law enforcement authorities, and if there's a need to notify another school district or school principal. And could the conduct complaint constitute harassment based on the victim's membership in a protected class, which would be discriminatory harassment in violation of federal or state civil rights laws? Because then there's different procedures attached to that as well. And so for safety, before fully investigating the allegations, the principal or designee will take steps to assess the need to restore a sense of safety to the alleged target and or to protect the alleged target from possible further incidents. So some of these things that we can do would be making changes to seating arrangements, especially looking at those transition times, those lesser structured times, arrival, departure, recess, lunchtime. On the bus, we might be looking at a seating arrangement on the bus and in establishing maybe a safe person for the target as well. So identifying a point person that the person who's making the allegation can go to and have an immediate access to. And so then we also can move on to the next slide. We need to consider if there needs to be interim supportive measures. So interim measures, they're individualized services and support offered as appropriate before an investigation and or while the investigation is pending. So this might be what a time where we would offer additional counseling sessions to a student or access to the counselor. And we make these decisions based on a case-by-case basis, but we prioritize receiving the input of the target and the parents, depending on the age, the developmental ability of the student involved, the severity of the allegations, and any continuing effects on the target. And so we do have an obligation to notify law enforcement authorities on receipt upon receipt of a report of bullying. The principal shall determine whether to notify law enforcement authorities. And the criteria that they use in order to make that determination is if there is a reasonable basis to believe that the incident may result in criminal charges against the perpetrator. If so, they must notify law enforcement. Parent consent is not required for this, and they must communicate with police in a manner as to protect the privacy of the victims, perpetrators, and witnesses. And the principal is required to document preliminary determination to notify police.
Can I back up a little bit and ask a question? I'm sorry. I appreciate the specificity of all this that's coming from the laws, it's coming from this plan, but also I just see the gray area. So like this, the initial response to bullying complaint, the preliminary investigations, the interim measures, I can see where if a student and family claims they're the target of a bully, the investigation's not taking place, they are in the class with that person, where the family who feels they've been targeted would want separation, but where it may take y'all a while to figure out if that's appropriate or not. Is that a gray area?
We might put in additional staffing or monitoring.
Okay.
So, we can't put any type of disciplinary consequences on a student until we make a determination, but we can put in additional supports or resources. And if the alleged target wants to be moved out of a class, we can adjust schedules, but we can't adjust schedules as a disciplinary consequence until we make a determination. Yep.
That is, thank you very much.
Can I just ask a question too? Sure. Just in regards to a student feeling safe, it seems like a lot of this is based on physical safety. How do you guys determine feeling physically safe versus feeling emotionally safe? Is that, or is it something where it's just pushing and shoving, or is it emotional abuse as well?
Oh, of course. I mean, a lot of the allegations of bullying are not necessarily physical.
Right.
The majority of them are not physical. I mean, that's very overt and able to be observed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just wondering, feeling emotionally safe is very subjective. It's a very subjective thing. So how do you guys determine whether someone is feeling, I don't know, how do you guys determine?
Well, thankfully, I mean, we have a really skilled clinical team who have the ability to help kind of do those risk assessments and assess with students and work in partnership with the principals as well. So where it says principal and designee, it might be the principal in partnership with the clinical team, the counselor, or the school psychologist to look into that. And the goal is for us to restore a sense of safety. Because whether or not we make a determination that bullying has occurred or has not occurred, if the student is making an allegation, if they have a perception of not feeling safe, we need to restore that sense of safety and do the best that we can in order to, even if it's baseless, from what's based on our investigation, a student's perception is their reality, right? So we still need to address that. I'll talk about that a few slides later. And so the next slide talks about the investigation. So the principal or designee will promptly investigate all reports of bullying or retaliation, and in doing so, will consider all available information known, including the nature of the allegations and the ages of the students involved. This is a really important slide for everybody to understand that during the investigation, the principal or designee will, among other things, interview students, staff, witnesses, parents or guardians or others as necessary. The principal or designee or whoever is conducting the investigation will remind the alleged student, aggressor, target, and witnesses the importance of the investigation, their obligation to be truthful, and that retaliation against someone who reports bullying or provides information during a bullying investigation is strictly prohibited and will result in disciplinary action. And this is really important because it's important to know that the principals need to be able to do a thorough investigation. So part of that is investigating and interviewing students, staff, witnesses, parents. So we have to ask a lot of questions. And we have to get corroborating witnesses. We have to be able to confirm the allegations that are made.
I don't see anything about timing. Is it, I assume that's deliberate, that we're
Promptly,
as soon as possible,
promptly. Yep.
but as long as.
And in
it's-
consideration of the nature and the severity of the allegations as well, too.
And is all of this documented throughout the entire process?
Correct, yes. And then the next slide talks about determination. So the principal or designee makes a determination based upon all of the facts and circumstances. If after the investigation, bullying or retaliation is substantiated, the principal or designee will take reasonable steps to prevent recurrence and to ensure that the target is not restricted in participating in school or in benefiting from school activities. The principal or designee will promptly notify the parents or guardians of the target and the aggressor about the results of the investigation. And if bullying or retaliation is found, what action is being taken to prevent further acts of bullying or retaliation. And the principal or designee will determine what remedial action is required, if any, and determine what responsive action and or disciplinary action is necessary. And then the next slide just kind of gives us a depiction of that. So really the priorities of that is for us to teach appropriate behavior through skills building, taking disciplinary action, and promoting the safety of the target and others. And then our Littleton Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan is consistent with state and federal laws and the policies of Littleton Public Schools, so that no person shall be discriminated against in admission to a public school of any kind or obtaining the advantages, privileges, courses of study of such people on account of race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, sex, socioeconomic status, academic status, gender identity or expression, physical appearance, sexual orientation, or mental, physical, or developmental sensory disability, or by association with a person who has or is perceived to have one or more of these characteristics. Nothing in the plan prevents Littleton Public Schools from taking action to remediate discrimination or harassment based on a person's membership in a legally protected category under local, state, or federal law, school, or district policy. And so, as Dr. Plenchi said in the beginning, there are challenges. We have to make these determinations, and we have to be able to parse out what is social conflict. And social conflict among peers occurs between staff. It occurs, staff and students, students and staff. So the principals really need to take the time to make those determinations if it meets the criteria of bullying, or if it doesn't, there still are actions and outcomes for that as well. We still would look at those three factors and do skill building, because there could be a skill deficit that we need to address with the student.
So to respond to Stacey's question earlier, the district could determine this is not bullying, but we still need to talk about how help these students interact and interact appropriately? Is that,
Absolutely. And one of the things that's important is that when there are determinations, the principal or designee will determine what remedial action is required, if any, and determine what responsive actions or disciplinary action is necessary. But when there's a determination of bullying, the principal or designee will promptly notify the parents or guardians of the targeted and the aggressor. So it might be that it may have not met the criteria for bullying, and there may be outcomes for that student, but we don't have there's not the obligation for us to then notify both parties because we didn't determine that it was bullying. We may have determined that it was mistreatment or social conflict or something that required a disciplinary outcome, but we may not be at a place where we're able to inform the alleged target of the outcome for the alleged aggressor. Does that make sense?
it does make sense, but if I'm that family, I would still want to know at the very least the investigation had concluded and the district had.
And we are,
Oh,
yep,
That's what I thought.
Yep. And that's and that is part of it. The parents are notified of the outcome. And so just on the last slide, just to go into that, as I said, all of the staff received annual training, but this summer we had a very fun, very in-depth, very informative and educative training by our legal counsel that went through, that was with the entire administrative team. They received professional development, and we reviewed our plan, we reviewed our process and procedures, and we have implemented new procedural checklist forms and documentation resources that align with our plan.
I'm sorry.
You know,
I'm trying to think exactly how to frame the question, but I think my question is, if after investigation, bullying is determined, it said, I think, reasonable steps will be taken to prevent the occurrence. Is it typically like based on the severity of it, there may or may not be a consequence, or is there always a consequence?
Well, yeah, it really depends on how you're defining or using the word consequences. Will there be an outcome if we make a determination that there's bullying? But it could range in as far as what those outcomes or consequences are. A student could be suspended, a student could be required to go through additional social skills training or sessions, where the student might be going through counseling. That could be the outcome, because really what it is we want to prevent the recurrence of the behavior. And sometimes suspending a student isn't going to reduce the probability that the behavior is going to occur again.
Right.
So we really need to look at what the function of that behavior is and match the treatment to that.
Right, I was thinking something more than a conversation that results in an apology, which it sounds like there is an action that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that counseling? If there is bullying has been determined, how do you guys decide who may need to go into that counseling? A little bit more about what that looks like for that student to try to remediate some of that behavior.
How we would just decide. Could you just clarify?
So if you've done an investigation and if there is bullying, does every student go into this counseling, or some of them do based on the severity, or some of them don't?
So I would have to, my default would be, of course, if we make a determination that there's bullying, there needs to be some therapeutic support that's provided to both the victim and the aggressor, of course. The length of time that would occur obviously would be not just a judgment by the principal, but also a clinical judgment by the counselors as well.
John, any questions, feedback? Good.
No, this is great. Thank you.
Brad, you get all your questions in, or do you have more? You're being sarcastic. I'm good. A little bit. Thank you. My feedback would just be that this is an incredibly important topic, and a topic that we've heard from the community on a number of times. So we would just ask that we do this really well. And I think we've all sat through like the professional quiz things, and once you've done them a couple of times, like you can get a 85 in your sleep without paying any attention. It's probably such an important topic that you need to cover this with an in-person professional development, even if it's just a portion of it, that, hey, this is something that we take very seriously within our district, where number 10 or 11 high school or like, we do a lot of things well,
Oh,
but we need
absolutely.
to make sure that we continue to do this really well.
For sure. And I mean, and I'm speaking to, you know, mandating trainings, compliance, accountability from that perspective. But the administrative team at the buildings all infuses this through everything they do, through their SEL curriculum,
Yeah.
at their faculty meetings. These are topics that are continually touched on because it's based on students' relationships
Sure. And
and
then
staff relationships.
we mentioned it, or someone had a question about communication. So obviously the fatal flaw of any organization is communication. And so if there is a bullying complaint or alleged, I would just ask that we, as best we can, keep the lines of communication open. I mean, we're not going to have an answer for them the next morning, but they just need to know what the realistic expectation is for a timeline. And we just don't want community members feeling like they haven't heard back or they don't know what's next. And I thank you for going through this, because although we might not have 200 people in the room or online tonight, this is going to be helpful for folks to view this part of the meeting, because we covered this really well. So thank you.
Right, and I think if you make an important point, and I do think that closing that loop of communication is really important, because it does take time. And sometimes we might say, okay, I'm going to be able to, you know, get back to you by, you know, in 2 or 3 days. And during those 2 or 3 days, we've uncovered many other things. And so we still want to get back in that 2 or 3 days, but it might be to let you know, all right, I need to interview several more witnesses. So this is going to, you know, take some more time, and we might need to come back together and relook at the interim supportive measures.
At times there are things uncovered that go way beyond what we thought we were going to find, which takes us in another direction as well. So
Yep.
sometimes they don't take very much time to draw a conclusion, but there's been a few that every time we get close, there's another road we need to take.
Right,
Sure,
and
but
there are
That
times that,
communication is important. The parent understands that we're still conducting the investigation. Yeah.
there are times too that we have allegations that there is no basis to, but we, through doing our investigation, find that the victim is the bully is the victim, that we really then have to do another investigation.
Are these instances usually reported kind of when it's escalated to a point where we're starting to notice kind of these emotional or physical behaviors, or are they usually, can we kind of nip them in the bud early when people are reporting?
I think both. I mean, there are times where we get reports where, a student may go home and report, so-and-so is bullying me. And the parent is very responsive and communicative with the school. And it could be a single incident. And it might be a situation where we don't determine that it's bullying, but then that informs us that it's a situation that we want to monitor. And we want to have increased supervision. And that's the important thing too, to make sure that students are supervised, and that even when there's no basis to the allegation, that doesn't mean that we're not then going to ramp up our monitoring and supervision during those less instruction times, so that we're able to have our eyes on and ears on the students.
Yeah, that's probably really important. I don't know if you guys already do, to communicate that to parents, that even just a small thing just opens your guys' eyes to kind of keep monitoring and keep an eye on things. It doesn't mean that there's going to be repercussions or there's going to be a huge investigation, but it's always good to kind of shine a light on something for you guys to look at, just to make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable about reporting early before it returns into something that's bigger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I do note that we have one hand up, and why don't we, since I'm guessing it's related to the topic, and I don't mind hearing from interested citizens as we're touching on a topic, why don't we take a moment to hear from we'll take them in order.
Okay. Danielle Fryer, please state your name, your street, and your question, please. Danielle?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Danielle Fryer, Taylor Street. My question is, what about kids with disabilities? I have a child that is on the spectrum. She's in the PACE program, and she's been bullied for years in Littleton. And I've filled out many bullying forms, and the last year has been absolute hell. And although I am pleased that you are doing this, what about kids that have disabilities? The lack of trauma support, the emotional damage that is caused to kids with disabilities. Lynn knows my child very well. We've had many conversations, but and so does Dr. Clenchy, but I am very, very concerned that kids with disabilities, kids in, you know, in the PACE classroom, in the CASE classroom, are not going to get the support because they're going to be looked at with emotional spectrums and autistic. And, you know, this has been an issue in the last year because of their disabilities, because of being on the spectrum. That's my concern.
Thanks, Danielle. Lynn, do you want to address that?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is that students in the CASE classroom are not under our purview. That would be under the CASE collaborative staffing structure. And as far as our specialized programs, as I was sharing, they're very amply staffed. So the ratios are very tight. So the students are very well supervised. And as far as the support that we're provided, in addition to school psychologists, adjustment counselors, we also have board certified behavior analysts who have a lot of expertise specific to students on the autism spectrum, students with, you know, vulnerabilities and disabilities as well. So all allegations that are made, we have to look at the nature and the severity of the allegations. But as Stacey, you were mentioning too, the supervision and the monitoring is critical. And so when we have classrooms that have 1-to-3, 1-to-4 ratios, we're able to have eyeball students all day long so that we can be immediately responsive should conflict arise in a classroom between students. Because that is when students have skill deficits. Like I said, the first thing we really want to do is address skill deficits. Students that might have pragmatic skill deficits or social skill deficits, there is a higher likelihood that they're going to engage in social conflict with one another. But then in a program, we're able to immediately use those as teachable moments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the response. Okay, next.
Okay. Sarah, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, Sarah. I live on Sarah Doublet Road. And I
Last
do have
name, Sarah? Your last name, Sarah?
Buckholtz. Sarah Buckholtz lives on Sarah Doublet. So I have a few questions for you, but so I'm hearing a lot of details about, you know, this bullying plan. I'm hearing about the investigation process and the consequences, and you know, I'm thinking about how all of these are reactive measures, which are important, but I'm wondering about preventative measures. What preventative measures are in place? I'm wondering, what does it look like when there has been harm that doesn't yet qualify as bullying? How are we teaching our children and our teachers about conflict transformation? Okay, so another question I have is, what kind of data is being collected and examined so that we get a sense of the school culture at each campus, so as to, you know, inform our goals and practices specific to each campus? I mean, how do we measure a successful bullying program? Like I heard someone speak about student perception, which I thought was a great point. What is the student perception around safety at our schools, and how do we know? How will you know? I mean, how will you? I'm sorry, I'm trying to read my own notes. How often do you visit schools, for example, and provide feedback based on observations of school culture? And then finally, I just want to talk about when it does come to reactive measures, including reacting to bullying. I'm wondering about opportunities for children to repair harm caused, and the opportunity to restore relationships as our main goal. I'm wondering how this plan is different from other plans. I know that this is a very detailed plan, but I'm wondering, I just want to urge our schools to shift our lenses from one that is behavioral to one that is relational, right? And so how are we providing opportunities for restoring relationships and repairing harm?
Thank you, Sarah. Would you like to address that? Thank you.
And so I totally agree with you, Sarah. I think tonight, the purpose of this presentation was to go into detail and review the plan and talk about compliance and procedures and investigations and terminations. But the mental health updates that we do, last year, we'll be doing this year, and what we do proactively, that would be a different presentation, but an incredibly important one. And we've gone into that in depth in a couple of the presentations last year, but I imagine that we'll be going into even more in depth in this coming year, giving these updates as well, and talking specifically about mental health, how we are addressing it proactively. The high school does restorative circles for sure, and then SEL is embedded through all of the teaching at all of the schools. It's just that would be a different presentation than what we're doing tonight.
The only thing I could add to that is we've invested very heavily in social emotional learning in our district. Our staff has received a lot of professional development. We look for those kinds of skill sets when we're in classrooms as part of the evaluative process. It's effective teaching. And we are also looking at.
Can you say more about that?
Well, it's certainly not going to give you a lot of justice by trying to do a half a minute spiel, but we use Castle model.
No, I mean, like how you when you said you observe for it, you come into the classroom
You see
to look for skills.
Yeah,
What
sure.
social emotional learning, like how do you make decisions about what social emotional learning goals are going to happen at each campus? Like, do you collect data beforehand? Do you do educational rounds?
Well, principals and teachers work together to identify areas within a grade level or class level that perhaps need to be addressed. And they focus on attention. When I go into a school as a superintendent, I'm looking for a multitude of things. First of all, is the school functioning the way it needs to be? Are kids engaged in learning and they feel comfortable being in the learning environment? There are many things one can observe when you go into a school, even walking the halls. So this is something that we're trained to do, and it's constant. I don't go into a school just to socialize. There is always a mission. And the principals are the same way. That is a proactive approach, but the way we help students develop the appropriate skill sets to interact socially and emotionally have to happen through teaching and modeling these behaviors and giving our students the opportunity to take a look at different situations and figure out the appropriate solutions in terms of how to handle these situations. That's part of what we do and embed these things in our curriculum. But I'm going to add one more point as well. That's the schools. We've had a conversation about this around the administrative table pre-COVID, but COVID certainly changed our plans. We also need to have those conversations with our families and use the same language in our households.
Mm-hmm.
What are the areas of social and emotional learning we're looking at? And not in a way that we're prescribing anything, but engage in conversations. How can we work together to make sure that our students are developing the appropriate social skill sets and the emotional skill sets to be resilient and learn how to deal with conflict?
Thank you.
The examples.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
No more questions.
Dorothy, we just got one at the podium.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sir.
Brian Talbot, 16 Butcher Lane. I'll say we're newly back in the district and we're boys of us varsity soccer's and the people. So,
All right.
I'm just a little puzzled by what I've heard in the last few minutes. I heard someone on the line say that they had submitted a whole bunch of bullying complaints and presumably not been satisfied with the outcomes. And heard Ms. Snow say, well, we're doing such a great job and we've all this great supervision. And so I'm just not understanding how to square those two things. And maybe the question is if a person feels that their kid is being repeatedly under attack and doesn't feel that the district is or isn't responding, knowing the perception is everything, what do we do then?
Yeah,
So,
Dr. Clench, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, I mean, there are other avenues that can be taken involving the Department of Education in an investigation, PRS, for example. Sometimes we don't have 100% customer satisfaction. We strive for it, but sometimes we don't get it. And it doesn't mean that we don't keep trying, but sometimes that process needs to go beyond the district to another level. So it's not as if it stops. I mean, there are avenues, and we're always looking for ways for resolution and bringing perception closer to reality.
Great, thank you.
I'll just add, no, Brian, I had the exact same question. This isn't the forum for us to kind of think about a single parent's or child's case or so, but the follow-up and the appeal process is, I'm glad you raised it. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for raising it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We do have another raised hand, Chair McCarthy.
Right, we'll hear from Stacy first.
Well, Sarah asked some really good questions, and clearly we were all kind of nodding our heads. It's something that's very important to us to kind of prevent this activity from happening in the school. So do we have this on the agenda to go over kind of that next phase of preventing it? And when is that? Because we clearly have some people that are interested in it. I'd like to let them know to keep an eye out for our next meeting for it.
Yeah. So we do have a roadmap for the course of the year. We'll likely touch on some of these things, but we've obviously hit something that, and we knew this, we hit on something that the community cares a lot about. So I think it would be appropriate for us to revisit the topic or provide some more education on certain aspects of this, because it is such a large topic and one that's so important. So
we may
good thought.
We may want to consider, again, I want to make sure that the presentation of the school committee is great, but I would also like to reach as many people as possible. We've talked with our administrators this year, and one of our goals is to conduct greater research or greater outreach, more correctly, to the school communities. And topics like this are perfect topics for that, to have parents come in, have roundtable discussions and talk about our SEL programs, talk about some of the challenges that we're facing with our students, and how can we work together to make sure that we teach the skill sets that our students need to be successful. We also implemented an evening for the entire district to come in, and we share different things that we're doing in our district. They're interactive, and we have an opportunity to have questions and solicit feedback from our community. Cyberbullying, for example, or just social media in general. So we're going to plan one of those as well. I'm a firm believer if there are concerns in our community, we need to develop a forum where it's not a one-sided conversation. And often school committees, due to time limitations, no matter how hard we try, we need to present this information. And quite often that other opportunity for conversations is limited. So I feel that venue would be more powerful. But however, if the school committee would like us to do something here as well, we can certainly do that. We would add to our plan, which is a great principle.
Well, why don't you implement that community forum type thing and then report back to us how successful it was?
Sure. And I guess another thing that hasn't been said this evening, we've had conversations with the middle school and high school principal about the importance of student voice. And now that we're hopefully turned the corner of the pandemic, so to speak, our expectation is that there are opportunities for our students to be involved in those conversations, and also include the students in developing the topics for those conversations. We did this pre-pandemic, and it was extremely successful. I had the opportunity to attend a lot of the roundtable discussions, and I was so impressed how our students articulated what was on their minds, and also some potential solutions for what they were seeing within a school environment. And I can't overemphasize the importance in middle school, high school especially, is creating those opportunities for our students to have those conversations.
Perfect, thank you. Looks like we might have one more hand up. We have some more on the agenda, so why don't we just take this last caller if it relates to the present topic, and then we'll proceed to the rest of the agenda.
Matthew Ridge, please state your name, your question, and your street, please.
Matthew Rich, 325 Great Road. I just have question slash concern. There's a lot of things going on. It sounds like that you're doing a lot of, sorry if my mic's getting a little loud. It sounds like you're doing a lot of hoping that this is going to go off well. In other words, that you're going to coach the children, stuff like that. I'm more worried that you're laying a lot of responsibility on yourself. In other words, it should not, you're laying a lot of responsibility of teaching the children what's right, what's wrong. I'm wondering if something like this comes up, how quickly why are the parents, and I'm not going to say the last ones to know, but if teachers see something happening, bring it up to the parents' attention before it becomes an issue. In other words, let the parents get involved before it spirals out of control. Because honestly, I think that if we can bring the parents involved into this prior to it becoming a problem, it would be better received by some parents, because not everybody feels that. I mean, personally, I don't know about myself, but I don't think that the school should be teaching beyond education on an emotional level, because not everybody is at that same level. With children at younger ages and older ages, you can teach children how to act, but you can't teach them manners, especially if it's not brought back inside the house, because how they act at school should be the same way they act at home. You know, that's not going to happen. And I'm just worried that it's going to be a snowball effect where it's like, well, my teacher told me this at school, and it's going to be a lot of butting of heads. And we need to watch out for that, because there's a fine line between parenting and mentoring. If you can sort of understand where I'm coming from on that.
Yep, we can. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Okay, we will move this one in time. We're going to hear a financial update from Business Manager Steve March.
Pull it up.
Perfect, thank you.
So the report is in your packet. Obviously, this is the first report for the new school year. Remind everybody that our fiscal year starts July 1. School year starts September, so the bulk of the expenses obviously run and start in September. That said, you can see that we've already expended a little over $2 million for the year. Some of that is prepaid for our case library programs and things like that we prepay, half of the year or something like that. So, again, no major concerns here. We are watching some expenditure areas that we already know or suspect we may have some overages in natural gas, for instance. Natural gas prices are up everywhere. Talked to our bus company today. They're working out what their COLA is going to be for this year based on fuel prices. So we're expecting that to come in a little higher than normal. So we're looking in other areas of the budget to make up efficiencies within the budget to cover some of those areas, and we'll report out throughout the year as we go. But no major concerns at this point in time.
Perfect. Any questions for Steve? No? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and next we have prepared a summary or sort of a roadmap for the 2022-2023 school year for school committee presentations. Just for the audience's benefit, this is something that sort of came out of our summer workshop, where we felt like there were a number of topics that we had heard from the community on over the past year. We wanted to make sure that we slotted them appropriately. There's also a number of presentations that simply just need to take place so that we can evaluate Dr. Clenchey at the end of the year. So in an attempt for this not to be incredibly dry, I'm going to narrate some of this just for the audience. So obviously this is today's meeting and we're all aware of what's happening tonight. At our very next meeting, we're going to go through the map testing update. And then the idea behind this is that we're going to look at every aspect of the district strategic plan. And they'll give the administration an opportunity to present to the school committee where we're being successful, where we still have some work to be done, and where the challenges are. And it'll be, shared with the school committee. And the hope there is that we can problem solve or advocate for resources to address some of those concerns. And then we're also going to hear at that second meeting from two principals as it relates to their school with curriculum instruction and assessments, school improvement plans. The following meeting, we would hear from the other two schools. The big one there on October 13th, which we heard from the community, was an update on the school safety plans. So we're likely going to be looking to invite the chief of police or the school safety resource officer in and take a bit of a deeper dive there, which we're all excited about. The following meeting, October 27th, we hope to hear from our school start time subcommittee. That may slide. I don't know, depending upon when we're going to get the information back from our study. But that's also a meeting where we plan to take a deeper dive on the professional development and what's happening in district, out of district, all the professional development opportunities. If I'm skipping something, it's not that it's not important, but it's just maybe not the major focus of the meeting. November 17th, we'll hear about AP testing. We'll get an update on athletics, which is typical. And then last year, there was an implementation from the state, or we implemented from the state, the dyslexia and early literacy screening. So we'll get an update on that. And then also, the district engaged a third party on a special education program review. So a big portion of our meeting on November 17th will be the update on that. December 1st, capital request for the school district as it relates to budgeting. That'll also be a meeting or two after the district has participated in a tri-district PD day, which would be election day. So we'll get that update. December 15th, we'll have the MCAS update. We'll also hear about which we had asked for an update, which is standard number 3, community engagement and communication. So we'll take a deeper dive there. January 12th, school-based wellness update, a review of the strategic plan. So we'll hear from the principals again, more specifically about climate and culture within the schools. January 26th. And again, this is all subject to change. This is all fluid, but this is at least where our head's at for right now. January 26th will be a meeting. We'll have a deeper dive on technology, the resources available within the district and what those challenges might be. February 9th, you can see that we have a light meeting plan, but I'm sure things are going to come up and I'm sure things are going to be added to this. So March 2nd, again, an update on professional development. That's typically when, for all those families looking to plan their vacations for the following year, that's when we'll look to put the school calendar together for the next year. We'll also, in conversations, will be intensifying as we get ready to present the budget. March 16th is our scheduled public budget hearing. March 30th will be the survey results, an update on school safety and social emotional learning. April 13th, curriculum update, and that'll be the superintendent's evaluation. I'll just share for everyone's benefit. I always thought that came early in the year because it's way before the end of the school year, but it's before elections. So Kelly made me aware, obviously, that it should be the 5 of us that evaluate the superintendent and not potentially new folks coming in. So that's why that's there on April 13th. May 4th is when we will start some of that material that we try to get through at the end of the year. when we get those really large agendas, which would be, we'll hear from two schools, we'll hear part 2 of curriculum updates. I just kind of skipped over that. On April 13th is when we'll start the curriculum updates. It's a 3-part series. So April 13th, part 1, May 4th, part 2, and then part 3 of the curriculum update will be May 18th. Those last 2 meetings will also hear school improvement plan updates from 2 schools on the 4th and the 18th of May. And then hopefully we'll have all regular school committee business done by June 1st. And that'll be a light meeting. I know that won't be the case. And then we have a placeholder in the event that we need a meeting for June 15th. So we just wanted to share with the community that there was a lot of thought that went into this year. And I think we're going to hit a number of topics. Of course, this is all subject to change, and I'm sure we're going to be there'll be multiple requests to add more, and we'll do everything we possibly can in the school year to cover as much ground as possible. So did I miss anything, or did anyone have anything else to add there? No?
Thanks for putting it
Okay.
together, really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. You're all welcome, and thank you all for your input on that. Okay. We're running a little late, but that's quite all right. This is our second opportunity for interested citizens. I know we heard from some. We have one in the room. Please take the podium. Just name and address, please, for the record.
Good evening. My name is Wilson Kadistan, and my address is 8 Scott Road. And I co-chair the Cpac, which is Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for a whole host of things. Special Education Review that's coming up. Really grateful for that. For letting us have tables at every back to school night. People are having fun with that. For the school committee and the district to engage with the Cpac, we're very grateful for that. And for the school committee invitation to let us learn more about budgets. That's good. And also thank you to Dr. Kelly for Dr. Penchik for being open to have conversation with the community. If there's something that we parents in the Cpac can help to initiate those conversations, we are very happy to do so. So the reason I'm here and I want to speak is that I want to address the proposed rescinding of school committee policy ACE, non-discrimination on the basis of handicap, or as it's called in the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Reference Manual, non-discrimination on the basis of disability. And the policy reference manual contains sample policies that conform to the Education Reform Law of 1993 and other state and federal laws and regulations, including Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504 is a national law that protects qualified individuals from discrimination based on their disability. And ACE fulfills the requirement of Section 504, which includes the identification of a complaint and resolution process, a designated coordinator. ACE provides the definition against which Section 504 is operated against. The ACE policy also supports the American with Disabilities Act, which is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in several areas. Having the ACE policy minimizes the likelihood of the spikes regarding the requirements of Section 504. Something the ACE policy, which I see is proposed that the ACE is deleted and the ACE covers, but ACE does not do that. Given that Section 504 complaints can be pursued as civil litigation with damages attached, I would say it's in the best interest of the town to be as specific as possible regarding its 504 operating framework. And being specific and ensuring that it is easy for everyone to access, understand and abide by what is required for compliance is a form of risk control, and it is fiscally responsible. More important though, removing language from the policies which define specific protections for people with disabilities is an act that disempowers those with disabilities. If indeed the language was found to be duplicate, which it is not,
then it does no harm to leave it in place. I will also mention that in light of the bullying conversation and standard number 4, goal 2 in Littleton's district strategic plan, it says, ensure the district and schools are free from discrimination and harassment and support student wellness. Keeping the ACE policy intact will also support this goal. So I ask you to keep the ACE intact with the exception of the title, which should reflect the Massachusetts Association of School Committees titled Non-Discrimination on the Basis of Disability, not Handicap. If I have a couple of more minutes, Dr. Clench said, I don't know if this is the right forum to ask questions, but you said that there is a special ed support void right now, the missing staff and special ed in particular, and that compensatory services can be offered. So several times parents have asked, how are parents notified if students are missing out of services specified in the IEP? So that is a question I would throw at them. That would be nice to have an answer to as well. And if a child is removed from instruction, say a child with disability is removed from instruction because of behaviors or doesn't want to be in class, how is this documented and reported to parents? Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We're going to cover the special education review, and if we feel like we're going to address those, then that would be fine. If either of you want to address either of those questions now, I would be open to allowing that. It's up to you guys.
I mean, I can certainly speak briefly to.
Sure, go right ahead. Yeah, that would be nice, and then we can move on.
So all of the principals are very aware of their staffing. And they're very aware of the positions that they're still in process of filling. All of the principals have worked with our team chairs to determine if there are any voids. And thankfully, I mean, our special education staff are amazing. And so they're all pitching in and they're all covering. We already have noted where we have had to provide additional coverage. All of the principals are very comfortable with monitoring, taking and tracking any services that are missed. It's important to understand that compensatory services are not one-to-one, and they're not simply offered when a service is missed. They are to make whole. So when there is a substantial amount of services that are missed and are not able to be made up or covered within reasonable amounts of time, parents are notified, and parents are notified, and compensatory service plans are developed as a team. So all of those are always going to be addressed. Right now, we are, stretching our special education staff because we do have some support staff, but I can give one example. So like we have a learning center that might be staffed by a teacher and a TA. We're still in compliance because the teacher is in place. That TA is not a luxury, it's not an additional staff, but we're still in compliance with ratios and delivering services. It's an additional support resource when we also have that TA in that learning center that might have, between 6 and 8 students in it. We want to fill those positions, like Kelly said, but we're doing okay right now, and we're closely monitoring that at all of the schools, because there may be a situation where we need to consider a look at compensatory.
Can I ask a clarification question? So just so I understand, if, for example, my child receives speech therapy and is supposed to get 15 minutes twice a week, speech therapist is gone one of those times and she misses a session, it's not automatic that she would get another 15, right?
No, it's reasonable. I mean, there are sometimes students that are absent through illness, and not every session, is obligated to be made up. If a teacher is out, a couple of times where there's not necessarily an obligation to make up, but if we notice that there's a trend or a pattern, our student has missed, 3 different, three speech therapy sessions, and the speech therapist is on their own going to maybe extend a session, add 5 or 10 minutes to a session to make that time reasonably. But when we have, staffing voids where we see, like if a speech therapist is on maternity leave and we are not able to fulfill that position, then parents would be notified in writing and be informed of that. And then we would be coming up with compensatory service. We're not at that point.
Thank you.
And just one quick comment. My level of concern would be much higher if we were missing educators. certainly not as high, missing a few ed assistants. We have certified specialists in these classrooms, and they're the ones that oversee our ed assistants. They're driving the services. And folks, we have a new reality here. And we're not alone in this. So who knows what the future is going to bring, but if we can't hire a staff member and we're doing everything we can, we have to work with it. We can't create things that aren't creatable. So we're in a good spot now, but if I was in some cities right now in Massachusetts, I would be having a very different conversation with the community at this point in time, because they are struggling, and it's nothing that they did wrong. It's the fact that there aren't enough people out there to fill the positions. And I think as a community, we need to work together and do what we can to make sure we're successful.
Very good, thank you. Please.
I'll be brief.
Sure, just remember name and address again. Thanks.
Brian Carver, 16 Fisher Lane. I've read the existing policy AC and the existing AC. I haven't had access to the new AC, but I guess I was wondering, AC as it exists now seems to be quite detailed, quite specific, kind of exactly what we want. And I was just surprised to see that the recommendation was to get rid of it. Would it be fair to assume that that most of those 2 pages are in the new, much larger AC? And it's just, I guess what I'm wondering is this just shuffling around, or is it actually removing stuff?
So that is my understanding, and I'm going to allow you to address that when we approach the topic. That's fair. Because we've heard from the community. I think there's some things to discuss as we get to ACACE. So we'll be sure to take our time so that all 5 of us.
Thank you for
Superintendent.
yeah, all this.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I want it home. So we will move through subcommittee reports. We haven't met in a while, and we had a couple of special meetings over the course of the summer. So if subcommittees feel like they need to give us an update, feel free to do so. If you don't have an update, that's quite all right too. So PMBC.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief.
Sure.
So I finally have a few meetings under my belt now. I have 2 things to report. The high school roof, there's portions of it that need to get replaced. That's in the process right now. But as you might know, I guess we're having some more issues. It's a 20-year-old building, so it's starting to get to the point where kind of long-term, or there's bigger maintenance issues that are having difficulty with. So I guess the school board needs to initiate some type of request to start the process of getting the rest of those areas fixed. I'm not exactly sure where to go figure that out, but I'll.
That would be Steve Mark.
Initiating
Initiating the process.
initiate that process. Let's see, other than that,
Was that, is that the capital requests?
Yeah,
Is that what you're trying to- Okay, good. Great.
and then in regards to the Shaker Lane committee that I know that's all. Yeah, I think. That's about it.
Okay. Great, terrific. Budget subcommittee. It was just along those simple questions for you, Steve, along the emails that we had received from the town about capital requests and what's the plan, and do we want to have a budget? Do we want to schedule a budget subcommittee soon? Do we want to make sure we bring these capital requests back to our next school committee meeting? Since it sounds like the town's looking for those soon.
They are looking for that soon, and yes, I am going to schedule a budget subcommittee based on your availability, and I'll email that out.
We'll try to meet before our next school committee meeting. Would that be your intent, you think?
If you're available, yes, we can do that.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the meeting we'd like to invite the Cpac members.
Yeah, we can either do that or we can do it at the next one. This one's capital request specific for the town, but we'll reach out to Cpac.
It's your budget, so you have who you
Okay.
want it. So
All right.
you tell me who you want.
It might be better to have a separate meeting just to talk about special education budget.
I agree.
I think so too, and that way we can just take as much time as we need there. So if you wouldn't mind reaching out to us to get one of those scheduled, and then we'll report. We'll have a real report on what we decided. Awesome. Before we get to policy, do you want to give us a Cpac update?
Just real quickly, Cpac is very active, and we're glad they are. They had presence already at the back to school nights. And so, you know, just already spoken about that some and really appreciate it. Have liaisons for parents to contact at every school and to work with Cpac and Cpac's doing a really good job of trying to build community as well as kind of function as a business organization. And the final thing is that there is a Cpac meeting Tuesday night from 7 to 9. I'm the school committee's rep to Cpac, but I teach a class in Salem until 7 o'clock. So I probably will not be able to make it back, certainly not for the beginning. I'm happy to rush back and try to make it a part of it. But if another school committee member can go in my stead, that would be great. And I think Cpac would appreciate it. If someone can just raise their hand, that'd be great. If not, we can send emails around and see if it works for someone.
I know it wouldn't work for me in that particular night. I've been to a meeting. I think it's nice for us all to make a meeting.
Yeah.
If somebody knows that they can, it'd be great to get someone to volunteer, but if we need to follow up through email,
What's
that's.
the date?
It's Tuesday, the 20th. I'll send an email around and I'll coordinate with Cpac and let them know.
Perfect, great, thanks. We'll take the next one slightly out of order as well, so we can just end with policy. School committee start time subcommittee.
Yep, I'll give an update. So Beanal and I and Steve met with GPI, the consulting company, 2 weeks ago today, actually. There's a delay, not unsurprisingly, or not surprisingly, especially because the main person that was working on our project left the company, just unrelated. So things kind of got shuffled around, and I'd say there's probably a 2 to 3 week delay, which means our whole schedule gets pushed back. So I sent out a schedule to you guys about 2.5 weeks ago, and I would say just probably add 2 to 3 weeks to that. Everything will flow after that. Other than that, I mean, we were very impressed with the work they're doing. It's really methodical, very detailed and specific, and we were impressed. I think that they're thinking things through smartly, and we see some really interesting opportunities for some changes. So more to come.
And we're really excited to get that report because there is an opportunity and we really want that community feedback. So that's the next step. But the reason it's delayed is because we need that report.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Just note there's a bus delay joke. A bus system, but I'm not gonna make it. The other thing I would say is that is it appropriate now to explain just in general terms what our plans for for having there's an order of operations here?
Yeah, I mean, real briefly, we have, I'm looking at the schedule here that I sent out to the school committee and Dr. Clenchey. We will get the report from the consultants, which will include a small handful of options. And another option is to do nothing. Options to potentially push the middle and high school start times later. We will then create a survey and send the survey out to the community for about a week, gather feedback. We'll then sort of organize that feedback and then have an open forum for the community to attend, probably an hour-long session to get people's real-time input, questions, thoughts, etc. We'll then take all of that feedback from the survey, from the community input session, bring it to the school committee meeting that follows that, and present all of that in a synthesized way to the school committee. Let the school committee sort of absorb and digest that, and then 2 weeks later, we will put it to a vote. So we will look at the options, considering all that input again, and vote. We could vote to do nothing, but that's basically the order of operations.
And when we say community, we mean families and staff. So
Staff
very
and
important.
families.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
Good work. Thanks for moving that along. Okay, policy subcommittee. I'm going to turn it over to Brad to lead us through.
Sure, we have a lot of policies in front of us for second reading, most of which we looked at before, some of which we've been invited to scrutinize even more closely. And so I think it's probably appropriate to talk about that policy, the AC policy, in great detail at the beginning of this, and then kind of move through. I'm going to ask Dr. Clenchey to help me with this. It's okay if I lead on this. Okay, of course. My understanding of this is that we have several policies against discrimination in our current kind of policy spreadsheets, and that it creates confusion sometimes for staff members and for members of the public about well, is this kind of discrimination? Is this kind of discrimination? What's the reporting mechanism? To whom would I take that complaint? And what we've done, what we have in front of us to consider is policy AC, which is recommended, the language recommended, and Brian, it's your question, recommended by the Mass Association of School Committees to get it all in one spot really clearly. So that, you have the whole list of protected categories and other things all there. The concern that we as a policy committee voiced to administration was exactly the concern that Osa and Brian are raising, is that we are not, as a policy committee, and I think for the entire school committee, not prepared to take any kind of step back, any kind of retreat, any kind of, mitigation or lessening of our commitments that are already in place. What we want is a cleaner, more easily digestible policy. And this was the language suggested to us by the statewide board that also had suggested the previous policy that was in place. So they're suggesting that this language replace it. And that's my understanding of things, Kelly. Is that accurate so far?
Well, we had our lawyer review these policies deliberately because of the changes that we've seen at the federal level. Every time you get a change in a political party, these conditions change. That's just the way politics go. This individual that we've used actually used to conduct federal investigations in these areas for the Board of Education federal.
In these areas, meaning?
Pardon?
And just discrimination?
Yes, all of the areas that you see in policy AC. So it was under his recommendation that we combine those other policies into one policy, and they're all included in law, which is in paragraph 2 of policy AC. What was somewhat problematic about the other policies is it's just putting pieces of law without the full story. Typically, school committees do not paraphrase or put pieces of laws into policy. Laws are laws, and they need to be viewed in their entirety. So I guess having said that and knowing the individual that reviewed our policy, I have great confidence in his recommendation. The laws don't rescind anything in the other policies. It's in there. So there are no changes in practice. There's no pulling of resources. Everything remains as is. It's just in a tidier package without redundancy and without quoting laws, which partial laws or interpreting laws, which we shouldn't be doing as a school committee. So I'm comfortable with AC and the rescinding of other policies. I did double check with our lawyer, and Lynn was part of that conversation as well, because I wanted to make sure that I did that due diligence to have a second opportunity to talk to the lawyer. So I'm fine with the changes as presented. As a school committee, if you disagree, that's your prerogative in terms of it's your policy, but we're doing this to make sure that we are totally in line with the expectations that we are required to work under with both state and federal laws. So that's the intent of the process this evening.
So can I ask some very specific questions just to make sure that I understand it correctly? So part of the strength that we all appreciated and that members of the community appreciated too about the policy ACE is it's very specific about definitions, about communications, about specifics regarding auxiliary aids, notice of Title II of ADA. It's very specific about those things. I spent some time, I'm not a lawyer, but I was looking through and checking the references. In my mind, it seemed that the ACE references were also included in this one. And what you're saying is that by reference, I want to make sure I understand this, that by referencing these laws, then it's the previous policy excerpted from those laws and included in the policy. These references and say we will follow these laws is saying we'll follow the whole law, not just the policies.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
Is it so? I'll ask it one more way, and then I promise I'll stop. Is is there any place that you're aware of, I promise before, I'm sorry, where there's distance, is there any separation at all between the previous policy, ACE, and this one, and the protections it provides our families and our students?
No, and I mean, it's a rarity that you'll have me consult a lawyer with these qualifications on a policy. I've been working on policies for 23 years. But when you get into these policies, you want to make sure that you have that kind of caliber in terms of what they do for a living. Look at these things. It's just a way of making sure that we're doing whatever we need to do to stay within the expectations of what policies are for. And policies have never been created to take excerpts from laws. I mean, laws are laws. They need to be followed from beginning to end. So that's the intent of cleaning up the policies and having one umbrella policy.
And so it for the committee and for the community, what this policy does is it brings all of these, instead of having separate policies or basis of sex or basis of, in the past language, handicap instead of disability, now puts it all in one place and makes the reporting and responsibility requirements very clear. You know, to the point about the community needs to know how this would work. This is pretty clear about whom they will go to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the other policies, that indicate there's a point person, but it should be the same point person for all of those areas that are listed in policy AC. So,
Okay, that's what I got. But
and Lynn, I'm sorry, Lynn, I mean, you were with me on the calls and working with the lawyer. Do you have anything to add to that? Anything that I might have missed?
So specific to the debate with the ACE and the AC, there is redundancy. And so the only reason for the recommendation is to eliminate that redundancy and kind of streamline things. Like Dr. Fletchy said, we have to follow the laws. We always do. Sometimes the spirit behind the ACE is ensuring that all members are offered reasonable accommodation as well. So like a good example would be ensuring that our families are able to have equal access to attend the high school graduation, for instance, and that extends to families of our students as well. But it is all covered. So it's really just redundancy, and it doesn't give us permission to not follow the law. Section 504, ADA, all of those things still apply.
so the references and provisions that are in the ACE are referenced here, and we're bound to the same extent in the new AC.
Correct.
We're bound to them and we're held exact same standards.
Yes.
And we would be bound to them even if they weren't in the policy.
All right, any other feedback? I mean, the way that I understand the community's concern, hey, you have a policy, I don't see the same language in the new policy. I have concerns because I might be losing something, but being brought up to speed on it, no one's losing anything. It's just the fact that there isn't a need to have specific policies for all these different classifications because we're quoting the statute and the law, and therefore everything that's protected remains protected.
No, I've been in some way speaking the advocacy of adopting AC. On the other hand, I do see the concern that I spent an hour at this last night trying to figure out what laws and how, it's legalese. Right. And so where the ACE is clearer about this is the definition, we've talked with the board and stuff. So I get it. But in terms of kind of clarity of uniformity of process and having all these protected categories grouped together and treated equally, I personally support the change.
Okay, and then we never do this with the intent of making a mistake, of course, but in the event that we wanted to revisit this and revert back because something changed, or we would be able to do that, correct? I mean,
that's wonderful. That's a wonderful component of a public elected board.
Yeah. Yes.
You can revisit anything you want at any time.
Yeah.
And Dorothy would tell you, we should keep a long list of when we look at these things and how, when we update them. Yeah.
That's what I thought. So it's, I mean, the recommendation seems to make sense. And then I just, I want the community to know that, geez, if we were to change our mind, we can easily go back and make a change.
So the question is to the chair is, do we want to move through these policy by policy with motions to rescind and if that's what we decide to do and to accept, or do it as a blanket?
ACAB is also to rescind for the purposes of the new AC.
Yeah.
So then why don't I would be willing to accept the motion for the four policies to be rescinded, and then we'll proceed with putting the new AC in place, and then we'll address does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
All right.
I'll make that motion. I move that we rescind the existing policy, the AC, ACA, ACAB, and ACE. With the qualification rule replace them. We're not just getting rid of them. Right.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Or that is unanimous. Perfect.
Right. So then I would move that we accept policy AC as our non-discrimination policy.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. Any discussion? Forgot to ask that last time, but there wasn't any. All right. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Mark that as unanimous. Thank you.
At a retreat, we all kind of took a run at each of these. I'm happy to walk us through them, or if anybody wants to claim one that you're a specialist in one of these, then feel free to do so. Policy BHC, to inform the community, is in front of us. It's about school committee and staff communications. A lot of these are just clarifying. It's been really helpful for us, I think, as a school committee to see what the rules are, right? And so what this one does, as I look for it again, it makes very, very clear that our communication with school district employees needs to be through the superintendent. And their communication to us in this capacity needs to be through the superintendent. And it also has language about visits to schools. If we visit, it's informal expressions of interest in school affairs and not as inspections. Just setting the groundwork for how we work with the district staff and personnel and the facilities. So we've read this before. I'll make the motion. I move we accept, approve policy BHC.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. Any discussion? Hearing none. Indicate you're in favor by saying aye. Aye. Mark that as unanimous as well. Thank you, Brad.
The next policy in front of us is staff complaints and grievances. Again, it's just laying out the processes for how the school committee will deal with kind of staff discontent and disagreements that go through channels. It's very clear about the channels and how this will happen. And largely tells the school committee to get out of it, stay out of it until it, unless there is an appeal of a superintendent's decision. That's not word for word, but that's just the crux. We shouldn't be involved in most of these things unless there's a formal appeal to us. That's that's the general sense of it. Yeah, fair. So I move we accept policy GBH.
I'll second. The motion.
Okay.
Oh, GBK. Yeah, I can't read.
Okay. Do you want to make that again?
I do. I move that we accept policy GBK.
I'll second that motion too.
Perfect. Motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Continue, please.
The next policy is KCB, and I really like this policy. It's no, it says we accept that community participation in affairs of schools is essential if we're going to maintain mutual confidence, respect, and work together. I think it's just a statement that we want to reflect the community in our deliberations and our conversations, and we will actively encourage the community to share their ideas, concerns with us. I think that's appropriate, and I move that we accept policy KCB.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. Any discussion? No, I think we had some discussion on it as it relates to the school start time committee and the forum and the community involvement with the bullying and harassment. So that's all good. Some practice. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous as well.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, we have one more policy, policy JICFB, which is bullying prevention, which certainly addresses one of the presentations we had and discussed tonight. It's the way it relates to previous version of this. It strikes out a couple of things. It's not harassment, intimidation, bullying, or cyberbullying. It's just bullying, cyberbullying, or just kind of cleaning up the words. There's a couple of timeline things in here. When in terms of reporting we talked about earlier, where now it can be an anonymous, it can be a phone call. It doesn't have to be the written report we talked about before. It's making it, it keeps all the protections before, but makes it easier for families and students, I think, to express concern and to report alleged bullying. So with that in mind, I move that we approve policy JICFB.
I'll second.
Great. Motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Gold. Any discussion? Hearing none, please indicate your favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Mark that as unanimous as well. Nice job, Brad. Thank you very much. We've come to the conclusion of our school committee meeting. We do have the need for an executive session. I just want to check in before we adjourn to see if I may have missed anything or if we're good to go. Looks like we're good to go. I'd love to accept the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Who was that?
No.
I was sorry. I'm not fast enough. Motion made by Ms. Gold, seconded by Ms. Patel. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Until. Thanks for staying around, Joey.
Yeah.